Now let's focus on determining our students' response to intervention using the data points. As you can tell, it's sometimes difficult to tell whether or not a student is responding positively to an intervention simply by data in a chart alone. The graphs are extremely helpful in helping us make a decision. When we're looking at the raw data, it looks as if Ima is making pretty good progress as it compares to the goal that she should be making. But it also looks like James is making pretty good progress because he also started out reading 40 words per minute and is now reading 53. The same thing for Susie. Susie has moved from reading 40 words per minute to 46. Although she's making progress, her progress is much slower than Ima and James. Now let's look at the graphs and see if we can determine how these three students are responding to the same intervention. Click on the Reading Graphs tab and let's look at Ima's data first. You'll notice that because I went ahead and put in all of my data points for the goal for the year, I can clearly see where Ima should end up by the end of the school year. The linear trend line is predicting that if Ima continues to grow at the rate that she has been growing, she will catch up with her grade level peers and meet grade level expectation by the middle of the year. We would consider this a positive response to intervention. If we look at James's data, while it shows that he is making progress, and his trend line predicts that if he continues at the rate that he's been making progress, that he will get a little bit closer to his peers. However, if this goal line continues to jump every couple of weeks like it has been, it seems as if James, even though making progress, he'll never reach grade level expectation, because as he's making progress, the expectations for grade level continue to grow as well. So you can tell that the gap continues to stay the same as James continues making progress. This is called a questionable response. When we have a questionable response to intervention, the first thing we do is ask ourselves, is the intervention being implemented with fidelity? If it's not being implemented with fidelity, then we increase fidelity. If it is being implemented with fidelity and we have matched the intervention appropriately to James's needs, we may want to consider intensifying the intervention and moving James to a Tier 3 intervention. Now let's look at Susie's data. Susie is also making progress, but as you can tell, her grade level peers continue to make progress and the expectations continue to rise. In fact, the gap, if Susie continues to learn at the rate that she has been learning, the gap will actually widen as the year goes on. You can tell that the gap here at the end of the year is actually a larger gap than it was at the beginning of the year. So if Susie continues at this rate, she will continue to fall further and further behind her peers and behind grade level expectations. This is called a poor response to intervention. When we have a poor response to intervention, the first thing we do is ask ourselves, was the intervention implemented with fidelity? If it wasn't, go back and implement the intervention as it was intended with fidelity. If the intervention was implemented with fidelity and was appropriately matched to Susie's deficits, you may want to consider revising the intervention, intensifying the intervention, or going back to the problem-solving stage to make sure that you identified the problem correctly in the first place. You may want to consider moving Susie to access so that she accesses Tier 3 interventions. Now let's go back to Ima. Since we've determined that she is responding positively to this intervention, we need to record our determination. We're going to go back to our student intervention log, which is kind of our platform for all of our students, and we're going to scroll over until we get to the section where we have our RTI reviews. So the first time that we reviewed Ima's data was after she'd been participating in the intervention for 6 weeks, so that was around October 15th, and we determined at that time that she was progressing nicely and she was having a positive response, but she hadn't quite met her goal. She wasn't meeting grade level expectations yet. So we're going to determine she has a positive response. She should continue with the same goal. For James and Susie, you would select something different. You might determine that you needed to increase fidelity for James and maybe increase the intensity for Susie. So you would make that determination as a team. And each time you review the student's response to intervention, which is about every 4 to 6 weeks for students participating in Tier 2 interventions, you're going to come back to this section of your student intervention log. You're going to plug in the date and the student's response to intervention.